In fact, I wasn't sure. I was a bit confused about what I should be speaking because it says agriculture in the Amritkal. So I was sort of wondering what this is all about. Now, he said anecdote, so let me start with an anecdote which concerns him. This gentleman was chairman of the Punjab Farmers Commission, and whenever he gets such exalted positions, I get the first phone call with 14 tasks listed out and said, would you help us do all this? So I agreed, and we drafted a policy for farmers, a policy for farmers in Punjab, because he was the Farmers Commission chairman. And then he said, we must have a consultation with the intellectuals of Delhi. So India International Center, Annex, we had this consultation. A lot of well-known names, I won't name them because they're all well-known. At least 5 out of 6 of them told me, why are you writing a policy for farmers? It should be a policy for agriculture. Now that really took me off. I said, look, I was agriculture secretary. I thought the policy should be for farmers. No, it should be for agriculture. So that's one of the mindset problems that we need to address in Amritkal. The second, this is against ICR, so pardon me. I was chairman Spices Board. That was way back in 1990. We brought tissue culture as a technology into the cardamom plantations. And we were looking at, all that Anupam said and other people said. This was put all together into a end-to-end kind of a solution. Because we found that farmers get better prices if the cardamoms are large, green, and with a better flavor. So we did all the research. We had a research institution, so we worked with them. And we worked with 2 private companies, A.V. Thomas and Indo-American Hybrid Seeds. But before we put it onto the farmers' fields, we said we need 100 trials, 100 farmers' plots across Kerala and Karnataka, Western Ghats. And we started these trials. And you know who objected? ICAR. They said, this is not your mandate. Why are you doing this? You are an export promotion body. You are not supposed to do all this. So I said, okay, what do I do? I went to Mr. Chidambaram, who was the commerce minister. I said, sir, this is my problem. What do I do? So he called up the secretary, DBT, the first secretary, Mr. Ramachandran. So he said, okay, let me go and see if these guys are making a mistake. Let me go to the Cardamom Hills. So he came, he saw, he was very impressed with the whole thing. And he reported back to Mr. Chidambaram. So he called me and said, okay, let us go to Mr. Jakar, the agriculture minister. So both of us walked into his room, and Mr. Chidambaram in his usual style argued his case, and Mr. Jakar said, please go ahead. So it is very difficult to work together. So I was very happy when you said that agriculture research in the Amritkal would probably involve biotechnology, information technology, digital issues, robotics, much more quantum science, data science. So I think the way we look at research, and when you say R&D, I think we have to look at R&D across all this that can have an influence, water, across that can have an influence on the agriculture and the farmer's income. And the problem with policy, Ajay, is policy is always a trade-off. I think everybody said consumer versus producer, producer versus citizen. Where do you put this trade-off? And I go back to, again, my experience, another anecdote. Dr. Kurian always believed that farmers needed a very good price for milk. But he said, if the consumer doesn't buy, what do you do? So don't increase it so high that there is a consumer resistance. So he'll always say, okay, we need to give an increase to the farmers. Say, okay, 1.5 rupees, 1.75, let's increase the price only by 2 rupees. This kind of an understanding that the producer has to depend on the consumer to survive. And as somebody said, if I don't make a profit, how do I work? This question that, we work together, we live together, is also part of our policy. But the real issue, in my view, is what should be the centerpiece of your policy? Is it going to be a number of things? Because you would see that, everybody has a presentation, all of them exceptionally valuable suggestions. But how do you put them into a policy framework? And how do you look at the interdependencies of some of these? This is the challenge for policymakers. And typically, politics and social tensions come and play their role inside. And if you read the manifestos, you will find this. Somebody will say guaranteed MSP, somebody will say 10 kg free ration, somebody will say next 5-year free food, free power. All these will come in the manifestos. Then it becomes difficult to get out of those because maine promise kiya hai, I can't go back on it. So I think the whole policy environment needs a much larger consultative process. And this has to come from, I think, initiatives have to come from outside the government. Why I say this, you look at CII and FICCI, how do they function? They are able to, if not dictate policy, at least influence policy. I don't think the farmers are anywhere together in this country to influence major policy decisions because we can't behave like a trade union and make demands. We have to make policy in a manner in which the interdependencies are understood. So the Amritkal to me has to be a farmer-centric kind of a policy paradigm shift without ignoring the demands of food security and nutrition. And it need not always be, the FCI paradox of, 67% of the people getting free food, etc. That's a different model. How do we then look at that kind of a trade-off? The second element of that, to me, which is very important, is the degree of freedom enjoyed by farmers. Farmers are restricted. In fact, somebody said 91, reforms missed farmers completely. We have not got out of this mindset that, the farmers need hand-holding. Fair enough. I agree there. But they're not intelligent enough to take decisions is something that I don't agree with. They are much more informed. They know what is best for them. They have a lot of traditional wisdom, which most of us don't have. And therefore, should we restrict them everywhere? What to plant, when to plant, how to plant, where to sell, how to sell, not to sell, which loan to take, which loan not to take, what kind of subsidy. Now, subsidy is also a kind of restriction which directs you to do a certain thing, which takes away that freedom to do something. So, I would rather go with Shivkumar's idea of let's create some alternates somewhere. So, increase the degree of freedom by reducing legal, regulatory, financial restrictions to the extent that, it reduces at least by half. The third is, I think, we don't look at the whole value chain of any commodity, and we don't therefore look at what is the share of the farmer in the consumer rupee. And again, I go back to my NDDB experience. We did this analysis, and of course, Amul, in terms of cash and kind services put together, returns around 82 to 83% of the consumer rupee. But even the worst dairy cooperative was around 72%. Now, is there any analysis available that these figures can be put together in any commodity? extremely difficult except what is procured. But what the other part, when I talked about freedom, I missed out that why should we have ad hoc? Export restrictions can be a part of policy. I don't have a problem with it. But should export restrictions be a kind of trigger-happy reaction to any simple jump? Onion prices goes up by, I still remember, Harish Damodaran is not here, so I still remember it was probably the 6th of February 2010. There was a big conference of chief ministers on food inflation, agriculture, etc. The headline in Hindu Business Line, that's why I remembered Harish, and not his piece, however, that onion prices shoot up by 33% or something. That was the headline. The onion prices had actually gone up from 1.5 rupees to some 1.95 or something. And I had 3 letters from 3 chief ministers asking for market intervention for onions. So, what is it that we are trying to do? What is the narrative? How is the narrative being developed? Is also a very important question. So, should we have these export bans, stock limits as an ad hoc measure? Or should it be something that we should announce right before the farmer gets into the crop? And okay, you have a shortage, you handle with imports. You have a shortage, you handle it otherwise. Why should the farmer pay the loss because you want a lower consumer price? Is there a calculation anywhere, anytime, that what has this ban cost as a loss to the farmer? Is it not the responsibility of the government to at least partly supplement or compensate that loss? This question is never asked whenever that ban comes. Now, R&D, I think Mr. Mai has made an excellent presentation, but I segregate R&D from technology. Our preference, unfortunately, has become technology because that's very easy. You bring them from somewhere, pay for it. Some private person will bring it. And therefore, let's forget basic R&D. I think it's a bad idea. And I do agree with you, myself, that the KVKs is eating up all your money, but your ICR is to be blamed for it. Because as agriculture secretary, I had lots of money. I said, I'll take over all the KVKs. But DG said, no, you can't. So I said, okay, keep it, spend the money. Because if it's extension, it should be a part of an agriculture larger complex. But anyway, that's a different story. But I do agree with you that I think we should probably in the budget create a separate subhead for only research. And that should go to specific, somebody said about research priorities. I think it was one of the presentations, Dwara, I forget who. That, I think, is the key. Well, the future, of course, you heard about digitalization, AI, robotics. Now, the question is, how do we bring these capabilities of the private sector into a larger policy environment? And how do we ensure that it does benefit the farmer? I'm not even arguing that all the benefits should go to the farmer, but some part of it, some part of the value that you add, how do you bring it to the farmer? In fact, I was very impressed with that Chile, Telangana example. Now, if that's going to work, then even the farmer will be willing to pay for that kind of a technology intervention. So how do we make it an enabler in the policy regime? And how do we have some kind of a regulation which verifies that, okay, what you're saying is true. You may not have got 21% productivity increase. Even if you have got 15%, I would value it because that 15% goes to the farmer. So how do we sort of do that in some form? So of course, climate change, everybody talks about. My own worry is we are not ready to handle climate change in the Amritkal. So I think, to me, that's the biggest elephant in the room. Are we ready in terms of anything, technology, adaptation, management, practices, whichever way you look at it? So probably a much larger consultation there. Now, the real problem will be that was mentioned in passing. How do we get the states to align on the policy, all the center to align with the policy of the states? It need not always be center driven. It can always be, how do we get a consultative process in which the state policy is in tune with the central policy, or vice versa? It works together for the farmers, because the policy for Punjab will be different from the policy for Rajasthan. It has to be different, or for Maharashtra, or for Karnataka. So how do we get this right in a larger sense with the farmer prosperity as the center of the whole thing that we are trying to do? And this actually leads me into a larger question about how do we get prosperity into rural India? Because when you talk about farmers, we are somehow missing out agricultural labor who are dependent on the farms. So to me, I think you could say Amritkal has started, 1 year past. So I looked at what did the Prime Minister say about Amritkal. And to me, just one thing amongst the other things that he said, better living conditions for all. That is what he said. And what the finance minister said in the budget was an empowered and inclusive economy. So I'm just using these two phrases and talking about whether 50 or 45%, we can debate that, but about half the population that are in somehow connected to agriculture. So how do we make that meaningful, the Amritkal, for this 50% of the people? I think that's where the agriculture for Amritkal policy will have to work around.
Very important point.
Thank you. So would the Finance Commission, therefore, the 16th Finance Commission, look at this part of the economy in agriculture and empower the states to do certain things? Would the central funding change in terms of plan schemes to bring about that change in the state level thinking? Because many of the states are bankrupt. They are just about able to, in fact, the Kerala government is in the Supreme Court arguing their case, saying that we should be allowed to borrow more. So that is the condition of many of the states. So what are they going to do is a big question. So this brings me to my favorite topic on policy is, I think we have to rethink the entire food system. How are we going to do this and shift from a green revolution mindset to a larger prosperity, nutrition, food security, sustainability mindset, and think about this? And this is not either the government's job alone, or all the state and center alone, or all the departments alone. I think it's a multi-stakeholder consultation process which has to be meaningful, and it has to be driven by a large number of these kind of inputs, success stories, research papers, everything put together, is my last point on policy. Now, you said governance. Now, that's a real difficult one, because governance is largely, I think, a bureaucrat's domain, and we have not been extremely good at it. In fact, if you look at the whole issue of governance, we have somehow believed that restrictions are the correct way to go forward. We have not looked at enabling, even though in 91 we said that very many times, as the way forward. Now look at anything that a farmer has to do, from land registration to sale, to irrigation, to tube well permission, to electricity connection. take the whole gamut of things that every citizen has to go through, how much have we simplified? How much have we shifted to a trust-based kind of governance? I think this is a major challenge. Now, even in the recent, in spite of the digital public infrastructure, Aadhaar, it has made a difference. But in spite of that, you read the FPO guidelines. Anybody who has read that? I don't think any FPO can work. They have said 10,000 FPOs, will give you the money. But the way it has been drafted, and unfortunately, I must say it was not drafted by a bureaucrat. It was drafted by one of the top 5 consultants in the world. I won't name the consultant. Now, I think we have to get out of this. Trust people, make it work, help them do well. Many FPOs have failed, many have worked. So that's one. The second, look at the procurement stories in very large parts of UP and Bihar. Why is it not happening? Why is it that people are saying we are not getting MSP? It's a purely administrative issue of the state government. So if you have a policy of MSP and some states don't get it, that's a governance failure. So I think let's segregate governance from policy. Good policies can also fail. Bad policies anyway will fail. And why is it that the same policy succeeds in certain states, does not succeed in certain states? So governance question we don't ask because it's inconvenient. We don't have very many solutions. But with all this digital public infrastructure happening, if we can redo most of our processes, then I'm sure there is a solution. I'll close with one more anecdote. We wanted to simplify land sale registration in one of the states. Now, if you go to sell a land, there are about 11 or 12 certificates, non-encumbrance, no loan, your ownership, all that. So every time there are these issues, you go back, you go up and forth. So we pushed all these into one electronic digital availability. That if you have a municipal dues, it should be there available to the registration office. So you go, now there is a standard value because this issue about stamp duty evasion was there. So if you put everything together in one place which is accessible to the person who needs it, not just the government, person who needs it, I think things can be simplified. So this is a it took us 2.5 years to do it, but it is doable. So governance has to be, to me, a serious look at processes in which all these complicated things you reduce, and controls have to go out. Regulations, yes, fine, but more on trust than on some kind of distrust. So this, I think, Ajay, you have a challenge now, is to how do we write a policy for farmers? Make one more attempt. We may fail, but it's interesting to do it in the Amrit Kal, where we do not ignore the consumer or the citizen, but at the same time not make the farmer pay for others' concerns about price inflation or everything. Thank you very much.